The alarm clock's quiet hum cut through the Chicago morning chill, a familiar start to another Tuesday for Judge Alice. At 59 years old, she'd seen more sunrises from her apartment overlooking Lake Michigan than she cared to count, each one promising a day filled with new human stories, often tinged with sadness or desperation, sometimes with a flicker of hope. She moved with a practiced grace, her joints a little stiffer than they used to be, but her mind still sharp, honed by decades on the bench. The drive to the courthouse was always quiet, the city slowly waking around her, buildings stretching towards the graying sky. She thought about the cases waiting for her, the stacks of folders filled with lives laid bare. Her job was to apply the law to seek justice, but she always tried to remember there was a person, a history, a struggle behind every charge. Sometimes, the sheer weight of it all felt heavy on her shoulders, a constant ache. She often wondered if she was truly making a difference, if her rulings really helped people, or if she was just another cog in a giant, imperfect machine. This was her quiet, internal nemesis, the nagging doubt that whispered to her late at night, questioning the impact of her life's work. She had started her career with such bright ideals, believing she could mend broken lives, but after so many years, seeing the same patterns repeat, the same cycles of poverty and mistakes, it was easy to feel weary, to feel that the system sometimes failed the very people it was meant to protect. Each day, she fought against that cynicism, striving to see the glimmer of potential in every individual who stood before her. She took her seat on the bench, the familiar oak of the courtroom cool beneath her hands. Today started like many others, a parade of minor offenses, each with its own tale of wrong turns and bad luck. Then, a new file landed on her desk. The charge was petty theft, shoplifting a suit from a department store. The defendant was a young man named Marcus, just 22 years old. He stood before her, his shoulders hunched, his eyes fixed on the floor. He didn't look like the hardened criminals she often saw. His clothes were worn but clean, and his face, though clouded with fear, had a youthful innocence that tugged at her. He just seemed lost. Alice looked at the police report, the security footage description. A suit, not a flashy item, not something easily resold for drugs, which was often the case for shoplifted clothing. This was different. She leaned forward, trying to catch his eye. The public defender, a harried young woman named Sarah, quickly began to outline the plea agreement. Marcus would plead guilty, receive a suspended sentence, and be placed on probation. It was standard, quick, and efficient, but something inside Alice resisted. She felt that familiar flicker of unease, that sense that there was more to this story. She interrupted Sarah, her voice calm but firm. "Marcus," she said, her gaze fixed on him, "why did you steal this suit?" Marcus flinched, his head still down. He mumbled something unintelligible. Sarah tried to intervene, suggesting it was simply a mistake, a lapse in judgment, but Alice held up a hand. "Marcus," she repeated, a little softer this time, "I need to hear it from you." He slowly lifted his head, his eyes meeting hers for the first time. They were filled with a raw, desperate shame. He took a shaky breath, and the words tumbled out, quiet but clear. "I had a job interview, Your Honor. The best chance I've ever had. For a big company downtown. I needed a suit. I didn't have any money. I tried everything. I just wanted to make a good impression." His voice cracked. He explained how he had been out of work for months, how his younger sister was counting on him, how he was trying so hard to break free from the poverty that had always surrounded his family. He wasn't trying to be a criminal, he was trying to be a provider. He was trying to climb out. Alice listened, a knot forming in her stomach. This was precisely the kind of situation that fueled her internal nemesis, the doubt about whether the law truly served justice in every circumstance. Here was a young man, clearly not malicious, desperate to do right, driven to a desperate act not by greed, but by a yearning for dignity and opportunity. The prosecutor, a stern man named Mr. Thompson, argued that a crime was a crime, regardless of motive. The store manager, who was also present, insisted on pressing charges to deter others. The rules were clear. But Alice looked at Marcus, his face now etched with despair, the small spark of hope that had briefly appeared when he spoke now extinguished. She could see him accepting his fate, another young life potentially derailed by a criminal record for trying to better himself. The weight of the system felt crushing. She imagined the ripple effect. A criminal record, even for a minor offense, making it impossible to get the job, sending him spiraling back into the very situation he was trying to escape. Her heart ached with a familiar helplessness. She felt trapped between the rigid demands of the law and the undeniable pull of human compassion. She excused the court for a brief recess, needing a moment alone in her chambers. The silence of her office was heavy. She stared out at the city skyline, the tall buildings symbols of the success Marcus yearned for, and the seemingly insurmountable barriers he faced. The thought of sending him to jail, or even saddling him with a record for trying to interview for a job, felt profoundly wrong. It felt like condemning him for trying to rise. She slumped in her chair, the weariness of her decades on the bench settling deep into her bones. She felt like giving up, like the system was too big, too unyielding, and she was too small to make a real difference. But then a different thought arose, a flicker of that old, youthful idealism she'd almost forgotten. What if she could do more? What if she could reach beyond the legal codes, beyond the standard procedure? She looked at Marcus's file again. No prior offenses. A clear effort to explain himself. A genuine desire to improve. She took a deep breath. She decided she couldn't just let him become another statistic. This was her moment, her chance to fight back against the cynicism that threatened to consume her. She returned to the courtroom, the gaze of everyone fixed on her. She looked at Marcus, then at the prosecutor, then at the store manager. "I have considered this case carefully," she announced, her voice resonating with a newfound strength. "While the defendant did commit a crime, the circumstances are unusual." He was not seeking personal gain or engaging in malicious behavior. He was seeking an opportunity for employment and a better life. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room. "I am suspending the charges against Marcus with the condition that he perform 200 hours of community service and write a formal apology letter to the store." A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Mr. Thompson looked outraged, the store manager bewildered, but Alice wasn't finished. She leaned forward, addressing Marcus directly. "Marcus," she said, her voice softer now, "I want to see you in my chambers in 15 minutes. Sarah, the public defender, looked utterly stunned but nodded quickly, ushering Marcus out. In her chambers, Marcus stood nervously, twisting his hands. Alice motioned for him to sit. She didn't lecture him. Instead, she spoke about second chances, about the importance of believing in oneself even when others don't. She told him she admired his effort, even if his method was misguided. Then, she did something she had never done before in her entire career. She reached into her handbag, pulled out her wallet, and took out a $50 bill. She walked over to him, her hand trembling slightly as she held it out. "Marcus," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I want you to have this. It's not enough for a whole suit, I know, but it's a start. Go to a thrift store, find something presentable. Go to that interview, and promise me you will make the most of this chance." Marcus stared at the money, then at her, his eyes wide with disbelief. Tears welled up in his eyes, and he choked out a whispered, "Thank you, Your Honor. I promise." Alice felt a wave of lightness wash over her, a feeling of deep, profound purpose she hadn't experienced in years. It was more than just a $50 bill. It was a connection, a hand extended across the divide of the bench. Later that afternoon, Alice found herself in a quiet department store, something she hadn't done in ages. She walked through the men's section, looking at suits. She thought about Marcus, about his desperate hope, and a sudden urge overcame her. She picked out a simple, well-made dark blue suit, a crisp white shirt, and a modest tie. She paid for it herself, the cost a small sacrifice for the immense hope it represented. She instructed the store to hold it, and she made a phone call. The next day, Marcus, stunned and tearful, received the suit. He went to his interview, and he got the job. He wrote Alice a heartfelt letter, not for her file, but a personal one, thanking her for not just saving him from a criminal record, but for believing in him when he had almost given up on himself. He told her how that suit, that act of kindness, had transformed his life, giving him the confidence to start fresh. Alice's daily routine didn't change overnight, but she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The internal nemesis, that creeping doubt, had receded, replaced by a quiet certainty that yes, she could make a difference, one person at a time, sometimes in ways that stretched beyond the letter of the law. She began to look for more creative solutions in her courtroom, connecting defendants with resources, exploring alternative sentencing, always searching for the human story beneath the legal jargon. Her colleagues noticed a subtle shift in her, a newfound energy, a deeper compassion. She started a small informal mentorship program through the courthouse, quietly connecting young people facing minor charges with community leaders and mentors, always remembering Marcus. She became known as the judge who saw people, not just cases. Years passed, and Alice eventually retired, leaving behind a legacy of compassionate justice. One crisp autumn evening, she was attending a local community awards ceremony, being honored for her decades of service. As she sat in the audience, a distinguished young man walked onto the stage to accept an award for his work with at-risk youth, helping them find pathways to employment and education. He spoke eloquently about the importance of second chances, about the power of unexpected kindness. As he concluded, he looked directly at Alice, a warm smile spreading across his face. "I wouldn't be here today," he said, his voice carrying through the hall, "if it weren't for a compassionate judge who saw more than a crime. She saw a young man who just needed a chance. She didn't just give me a suspended sentence, she gave me a suit. She gave me hope. Judge Alice, thank you for everything." It was Marcus, now a respected leader in the community. Alice's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of profound joy and gratitude. She realized then that her impact wasn't just on one person, but a whole chain of kindness, a ripple effect that had spread far beyond her courtroom. The weariness of her past was replaced by a deep, abiding peace, a certainty that her life's work, in its quiet, persistent way, had truly made a difference. She had helped a struggling young man, and in doing so, she had helped countless others he would go on to inspire. Things truly do get better, she thought, sometimes with the help of a quiet act of kindness, a leap of faith, and a single, well-fitting suit.